Hope you guys have survived the week. Hope you have thrived the week. And I hope you're excited, maybe even as excited as me, to look today at Revelation 17. There are 3 sections left in the book of Revelation, at least according to my summary outline that I originally put together and offer on my website, or if you sign up at devotionswithdre.com on the email list, or you can just message me and ask me for the outline. 3 sections left. This one is the section of chapter 17 through the first part of 19. This is where we see more about the beast and the prostitute that is Babylon. And we learn more about the destruction of the Babylon system in the end. In other words, the event that was mentioned last chapter in 16 of Babylon being defeated forever, that's now getting sussed out. So God is answering the prayers of the saints and the martyrs, and he's punishing evil. G.K. Beale, whose commentary is my main resource for this chapter, calls this next 2.5 chapter chunk, quote, a large interpretive snapshot of the 6th and 7th bowls, end quote. So he's saying the bowls we read about, the final judgments, this section gives us a more thorough understanding of the judgment against Babylon that they represented. So we're zooming in on the 6th and 7th bowls, according to Beale. We know that at the time of writing, the Roman Empire was the latest iteration of Babylon, which we are looking at as a world system, an evil system, or the rebelliousness of oppressing others and worshiping idols and demons instead of the Creator Yahweh. That's what's happening in the book of Revelation with this phrase, the harlot that is Babylon. It's always happening in different forms. This evil system, this corrupt, the corruption of those in power, getting reiterated again and again throughout history, and it will up until Jesus' return. Today, we're just looking at chapter 17, so the first part of this Follow Babylon theme section, and we're going to get a more thorough explanation of the avatar that I call the prostitute that is Babylon. Okay? Chapter 17 is all about the influence that the world system / beast system has on global economics, world religions, and governments, and how there's a downfall impending for all of that corruption. So here we go. Let's read chapter 17 of the book of Revelation. This is the most important part of the episode. So if there's any part that you tune into, focus on, listen to, make sure you're not spacing out, it's right here. We're reading the word. Here we go. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits on many waters. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries." Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet, and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. In other words, the cup contains obscenities and fornications. A lot of people think the cup contains blood, but it contains, according to this description of the vision, obscenities and fornications. Let's keep reading. The name written on her forehead was a mystery. It said, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, not necessarily from the cup she's holding at the moment, as that contains abominations, but implicitly from recent oppression and murders. The blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Then the angel said to me, "Why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that she rides, which has 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast, which you saw, once was, now is not, and yet will come up out of the abyss and go to its destruction. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because it once was, now is not, and yet will come. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are the 7 hills on which the woman sits. They are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen. 1 is, the other has not yet come. But when he does come, he must remain only for a little while. The beast who once was, now is not, is an 8th king. He belongs to the 7 and is going to his destruction. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. Okay, almost done. They have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. They will wage war against the Lamb. But the Lamb will triumph over them because he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And with him will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers. Last part here. Then the angel said to me, the waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They'll bring her to ruin, leave her naked. They'll eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God has put into their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to hand over to the beast their royal authority until God's words are fulfilled. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. That's chapter 17. There's a lot there, a lot of fascinating things there, so let's dive in. So in verse 1 and 2, we read, one of the 7 angels who had poured out the 7 bowls came over and spoke to me. Come with me, he said, and I'll show you the judgment that's going to come on the great prostitute who rules over many waters. And then the kings of the world have committed adultery with her, and the people who belong to this world have been made drunk by the wine of her immorality. So this first section is an introduction to the vision. John's talking with a major angel, one of the bowl pourers, right? And this verse makes it sound like the bowls have already been poured out at this point. Most people think. And the angel is going to zoom in on the destruction of Babylon, aka the end of the beast system. The Life Application Bible tells us that the prostitute figure here, while it's called Babylon, the name of an empire that's long gone by the time that Revelation is written, it, quote, represents the early Roman Empire with its many gods and the blood of martyrs on its hands. The water, remember it described her as enthroned on many waters, stands for either sea commerce or a well-watered, meaning well-provisioned, city. The great prostitute represents the seductiveness of the governmental system that uses immoral means to gain its own prosperity, pleasure, and advantage. Did you catch that? I'm going to say it again. The great prostitute represents the seductiveness of the governmental system that uses immoral means to gain prosperity, pleasure, advantage. In contrast to the prostitute, Christ's bride, the church, is pure. The wicked city of Babylon contrasts with the heavenly city of Jerusalem. The original readers probably rather quickly identified Babylon with Rome. But Babylon also symbolizes any system that is hostile to God, end quote. I hope that makes sense who she is. So as we know, believers are people who are loyal to Christ, and you can imagine a metaphor where the Messiah is a really awesome bridegroom and the church is a loyal bride. And you can contrast that to the beast system that's full of covenants with all sorts of demons and dark powers. Like, imagine some mafia, Donna, psychopath, sex worker that just keeps destroying more and more lives. Okay, we're not imagining your average tough times sex worker here. We're imagining a truly perverted, power-hungry, ruling entity that is totally okay with ruining good people's lives every day. A harlot that purposefully draws people away from Christ. G.K. Beale says this, quote, the king's and the nation's acquiescence to immorality refers not to literal immorality, but figuratively to acceptance of religious and idolatrous demands of ungodly earthly order. The intoxicating effect of Babylon's wine removes all desire to resist Babylon's destructive influence, blinds them to Babylon's own ultimate insecurity and to God as the source of real security, and numbs them against fear of a coming judgment, end quote. Through the book of Revelation, when someone's sitting, like she is here in this metaphor, it indicates sovereignty. So the harlot sitting on many waters here probably shows that she had sovereignty over international trade. She's like, I'm the queen, okay? Let's look at verses 3 through 6. In the spirit, he carried me out into the desert. I saw a woman mounted on a scarlet beast, stuffed with blasphemies. The beast had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet, festooned with gold and gems and pearls. The bling here, it indicates that she's the evil counterpart to the jeweled holy city of God. Are you catching that? She held a gold chalice in her hand, brimming with, remember what it has in it? Defiling obscenities, her foul fornications. A riddle name, or a mystery name, was branded on her forehead. Great Babylon, mother of whores and abominations of earth. I could see that the woman was drunk, and she's drunk on the blood of God's holy people, drunk on the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. So the angel takes John in the spirit to the wilderness. By the way, being taken somewhere in the spirit has major Old Testament precedence. It's a type of commissioning of a prophet. When we read about this happening to John throughout Revelation, we should be thinking, oh, he's an official prophet of God. The fact that John's being taken to the wilderness to be shown a prophecy against Babylon will hearken the many Jewish people in the audience back to Isaiah 21, where the prophet Isaiah relays a vision against, quote, the desert by the sea, aka Babylon, and says, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. So we're thinking of that. We're being hyperlinked back to Isaiah 21. The harlot has a mystery for a name. Okay, I was really curious about this. Why does John call the name on her forehead a mystery or a riddle when at first glance it seems like a somewhat straightforward label? Like it's just like a name. So it turns out John is hyperlinking back to Daniel 4. This was fascinating to me. In Daniel 4, there was a king in Babylon named Nebuchadnezzar who bragged and called it Babylon the Great. And Nebuchadnezzar had a dream that contained what? A mystery, a riddle, a mystery, a spiritually significant dream. It was a warning dream about his pride and his boasting. So, to quote Beale again, quote, Revelation connects this mystery with the mystery of the last days, fall of spiritual Babylon, end quote. In fact, I kind of want to read a longer section of Beale's commentary here. So that answered a question that I've had for a long time about why is it called a mystery? What is a mystery in the Bible? So let me just read part of page 359 of his commentary, shorter commentary on Revelation. Shorter, haha. This was a mystery prophesied and in the days of the seventh trumpet, according to 10:7, shortly to be fulfilled. The mystery refers to what is contained in the hidden counsel of God and now being revealed to his servants. In chapter 1, verse 20, and in chapter 10, verse 7, the mystery involved the unexpected, though not contradictory, way in which Daniel's prophecy about the establishment of Israel's latter-day kingdom and the defeat of evil empires was beginning to be fulfilled. The notion of mystery in both of these chapters is that the kingdom begins ironically through the suffering of Christ and his people. Similarly here, but now in application to the kingdom of evil, it refers to the ironic, mysterious way in which God will fulfill his prophetic words concerning Babylon's destruction, that the kingdom is going to turn against itself and begin to self-destruct even before the return of Christ, who will finally demolish Babylon. This was indeed a mystery not as clearly seen by Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Daniel, but is now made clearer to John. Fulfillment of prophecy always fleshes out details that were not contained in broadly given Old Testament prophecies. And then I'd like to read part of page 362. That John's lack of clarity about the vision explains a significant basis for his amazement is evident from the angel's assertion that he'll explain it. He'll explain the hidden meaning, the mystery of the vision of the beast and the woman, seen in verses 3 through 6. So if you look at Daniel 7, verse 16, part of the passage in Daniel 7, which lies behind the portrayal of the beast in chapter 17, it also emphasizes the need for clarity. The angel, however, questions John's fear, perplexity, and astonishment and brings reassurance by saying he will unfold the mystery of the woman and the beast. That is, he will unfold the judgment about to come upon them in spite of the woman's apparent magnificence and triumph, enabling John to have divine insight that pierces through the ambiguous appearance of the woman. Thus one should be aware of being attracted and confused by this woman draped in such dazzling bejeweled attire and clothed in linen, since all her embrace can offer is a full-strength draught of abominations and unclean things. Even temporary attraction or confusion about her will cause the believer to be unable to perceive clearly her truly evil and deceptive nature, and thus to be taken in, to some degree, by her and by compromise. End quote. I thought that was awesome. It's a mystery. How can this power and how can these elite celebrities and huge, powerful places and countries and spheres of influence be so appealing, be so attractive, and yet be so evil and disgusting at the same time. It's confusing. You can't look away. It's a mystery. It's a mystery why it looks like evil is prevailing, and yet we're heading towards what we know is God's judgment against evil. This is unfolding in a way not everyone would expect, but the angel reveals the mystery. He says this is all part of God's ultimate plan for redemption and for judging evil. So we see that the prostitute Babylon is not only on many waters, she's also in a wilderness. How can you be sitting on many waters and sitting in a wilderness? Well, she's seated on many waters in the desert, potentially with a sea beast. The desert and the waters are two metaphors for what? The place of chaos. Two metaphors that mean kind of the same thing. A place of chaos in Hebrew thinking. Both are spaces that people go to die. You don't want to be in the wilderness. You don't want to be out on the water. They represent the opposite of peace and flourishing and God's right order. So John combines them, just like Isaiah 21. We're also remembering that in the book of Revelation, the wilderness is a place where God protects and provides for his people, even in the midst of chaos. Since a lot of hyperlinks in Revelation 17 go back to Isaiah 21, especially verses 1 through 10, I figure it's worth reading. So here's Isaiah 21. This is the burden against the desert by the sea. That's Babylon. Like whirlwinds sweeping through Negev, an invader comes from the desert, from a land of terror. A dire vision is declared to me. The traitor still betrays. The destroyer still destroys. Go up, O Elam. Lay siege, O Medea. I will put an end to all her groaning. Therefore my body is filled with anguish. Pain grips me like pain of a woman in labor. I'm bewildered. Oh, I'm bewildered. To hear, I'm dismayed. To see. Sound familiar? My heart falters. Fear makes me tremble. The twilight of my desire has turned to horror. They prepare a table. They lay the carpet. They eat. They drink. Rise up, O princes. Oil the shields. For this is what the Lord says to me. Go, post a lookout, and have him report what he sees. When he sees chariots with teams of horsemen, riders on donkeys, riders on camels, he must be alert, fully alert. Then the lookout shouted, Day after day, my Lord, I stand at the watchtower. Night after night, I stay at my post. Look, here come the riders, horsemen. Oh, does that sound familiar? In pairs. And one answered, saying, guess what he's going to say? Fallen, fallen is Babylon. All the images of her gods lie shattered on the ground. O my people, crushed on the threshing floor, I tell you what I've heard from the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel. That's just verse 1 through 10. So I see so many similarities in Isaiah 21 and the book of Revelation. There's a mention of the threshing floor. The seer, the prophet, feels taken aback, feels distraught. Babylon falls as horsemen approach at the judgment of God for wickedness. It's all in there. It's all in the Old Testament. And John is just parsing it out. So clearly, there's an evil prostitute or harlot who represents the evil world empire, and we contrast her with the pure bride of Christ, typified in the city of Jerusalem. Some Bible teachers say the identity of this harlot might be the Sumerian goddess Ishtar, aka Inanna, aka Aphrodite, Venus, the goddess of sex, war, and violence. This seems to be her, according to Derek Gilbert and many others, and she's on top of a beast. Okay, sorry to say this, but possibly meaning engaging in sex, like depending on which Bible scholar you ask. Personally, I'm like, she is wearing lots of clothes, so I don't know. Maybe she's just sitting on the beast like a person rides a horse. That's what a lot of people think too. She's in leadership. She's in power. She's assuming that she'll rule and have lots of continued influence, right? Well, we talk about a lot of different interpretation lenses or views in this book, and of course, the identity of the harlot here is no different. There are diverse thoughts on it, from simply the literal Roman Empire, and that's it, to an apostate church. Some people think it's the apostate church in the future, to a future actual city where idolatry, aka spiritual adultery, is rampant, to a beast system that reaches across different eras and locations. As you know, that's my personal favorite lens to look at it through, to a purely symbolic representation of human civilization as it rebels against God in a more general sense. It's all over the board with Bible scholarship on Revelation. But here's a quote from G.K. Beale's commentary on this. Quote, as we saw in the letters, there's a clear connection in Revelation between illicit forms of economic activity, including simply the worship of money, and idolatrous practices. And the woman represents both. End quote. Remember, when we looked in the letters, we learned about the trade, guild, idols, and if Christians abstained from honoring those idols, it often became difficult for them to buy and sell. So that's the corrupt, wealth-worshipping harlot here. As far as the beast here, I mentioned, I tend to think the beast here is the beast of the sea, the Antichrist. But some people take this to be the land beast, the other beast that we read about, the false prophet. Others say it's a combo of the dragon and the sea beast. That makes sense too. One reason I think it's the sea beast, Leviathan, is because Isaiah 27:1 says that when the day of the Lord comes, Yahweh will crush Leviathan. It specifically talks about who is going to get defeated. And also Leviathan is described as having 7 heads in ancient Mesopotamian media. They all imagined Leviathan the way this chapter is describing this beast. But I can totally see where the combo people are coming from, because Leviathan basically is a dragon. That's the type of monster it seems that he was believed to be. Plus, the location of the wilderness/desert points back to chapter 12, and we can recall the dragon was in the desert, persecuting God's people from there. The text here says this beast has 7 heads and 10 horns, same as chapter 13's description of the sea beast. And it says it's full of blasphemies, potentially meaning that John is seeing maybe anti-God type words written all over the beast, or maybe even the names of gods, like the gods of this world, written all over the beast, possibly the rebelled Elohim that didn't steward the nations the way God originally assigned them to, but rather fell away and sinned and wanted worship for themselves and all that. The end of days here in Revelation is their final judgment for doing that. The woman is dressed real wealthy in this vision, isn't she? This could possibly remind us of Ezekiel 28. Ezekiel 28, some of you may know this, it's such a fascinating chapter in Ezekiel where the abuse of wealth and the corruption of international trade end up causing the evil prince of Tyre and the spiritual king of Tyre, possibly the fallen guardian cherub that spiritually rules Tyre, that may even be Satan himself, to sin. Okay, the abuse of wealth causes people to sin. Why? Because when wealth and commerce are used for evil purposes, that is condemned by Yahweh, so they get thrown down because of how they used their influence. They led in a corrupt way. Tyre is very similar to Babylon, and they're described in the same ways several times in the Old Testament. So this chapter should remind us of Ezekiel 28. Ezekiel 28:16 says, quote, "Your rich commerce led you to violence, and you sinned. So I banished you in disgrace from the mountain of God," end quote. It also should remind us of Isaiah not only 21, but Isaiah 1 and Jeremiah 2, where the prophets speak of harlots in red attire because they spill the blood of God's people. Okay, the red is the blood of God's people, martyrs. I bring that up because here in Revelation, the prostitute that is Babylon does the same crap. She seduces others with her wealth and oppressive, corrupt international trade, and she brings people away from God to idolatry. And she's going to come to the same end, being cast down. Also, look at Jeremiah 51, verse 13. It seems to be another hyperlink in this chapter. Quote, "Oh, you dwell by many waters, abundant in treasures, but your end has come," end quote. And this prostitute that is Babylon is drinking blood. So if you're one of our resident conspiracy theorists out there that believes in vampire elites, here's your verse to back it up. And the historical fact that the consumption of human blood has always been an actual thing, and of course always very much disallowed by Yahweh. So she's drunk on martyr's blood. Truly a disgusting figure here. Let's look at verses 7 and 8. "Astonished, I rubbed my eyes. I shook my head in wonder. The angel said, 'Does this surprise you? Let me tell you the riddle of the woman and the beast she rides. The beast with 7 heads and 10 horns.'" Okay, now we get a quick 1-sentence recap of the fate of the beast that we've been reading about already in the book. "The beast you saw once was, is no longer, and is about to ascend from the abyss and head straight for hell." That's his summary of the beast. And next, a super quick recap of the beast's followers. He says, "Earth dwellers whose names weren't written in the book of life from the foundation of the world will be dazzled when they see the beast that once was, is no longer, and is to come." So they're duped. So that's verse 7 and 8. John is being, quote unquote, astonished here. It could imply that this dark goddess is like intriguing or awe-inspiring in some way. Some Bible teachers feel like the text implies that, especially because the angel kind of says, stop it. He kind of gets what could be interpreted as a rebuke. Maybe John is a mix between caught off guard or a little mesmerized, or maybe he's just so appalled that he's completely shook. Either way, the angel says, why are you so shocked? And says, I will tell you the mystery, or the riddle. That's common phraseology in the Bible for when a vision or a parable is about to be interpreted or explained. And here we get a reminder from the angel that the beast is going to suffer a mortal wound and resurrect, and that will really wow people and gain him some new followers. Another reason I think it's specifically the sea beast, the Antichrist. And we're reminded that his resurrection time is short, and he's headed for the fire of hell. The description in these verses of the beast as an entity that once was and is no longer and will ascend for a second before landing in hell is to be compared and contrasted with God, who throughout Revelation is described as he who was and is to come. The beast tries to be like that, but can't swing it. Let's look at verse 9, 10, and 11. But don't drop your guard. Use your head. The 7 heads are 7 hills. They are where the woman sits. They are also 7 kings, 5 dead, 1 living, 1 not yet here. And when he does come, his time will be brief. The beast that once was and is no longer is both an 8th and one of the 7. Or, some interpretations, he's from the 7. And he's headed for hell. So that's verse 9 through 11. So many scholars feel that the 7 hills are Rome, a city famous for having 7 hills. Others look at it more as a metaphor for power in general. 7 kings is debated. Definitely something to ponder. What stands out to me is that evil leadership is almost over. He's telling him, hey, we're on 6 out of 7 here. Meaning evil leaders, evil empires, we're near the end of that. One last evil group is going to rule and then they're all done. What Beale says about this is, basically don't get too caught up on the numbers, they're likely figurative. Richard Bauckham says it might even be a Hebraic literary device called a graded numerical saying, where numbers in successive order are used in representative but not exhaustive lists. That gets used a lot in the Bible. So the angel explains that the beast is an 8th king and is also one of the 7 or descended from the 7, depending on what translation you're reading. And some people take this to mean that it's not quite human, that a powerful spiritual entity is going to rule part or all of the world at some point, and that he's headed for destruction. Other people say, no, he's a descendant of the corrupt elite. It's a human. Whoever the beast is, all this talk of 7 heads should remind the reader of the book of Daniel, where there are beasts with heads and horns, and they represent different empires, world powers throughout history. So the main takeaway in the angel's interpretation of the vision is the announcement of final judgment. Very on brand because it's a main topic of the book of Revelation. The announcement of final judgment. So moving forward to verses 12 to 14. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings, but they're not yet in power. They will come to power with the scarlet beast, but won't last long. A very brief reign. These kings will agree to turn over their power and authority to the beast. And here we get a super quick recap from the angel of how the final war is going to go down. They will go to war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will defeat them. Proof that he is Lord of Lords, King over all kings, and those with him will be the called, chosen, and faithful. That's us. Hopefully. So the beast's 7 heads are somehow sporting 10 horns. I don't know how to picture that, but maybe you do. And the angel says these horns symbolize kings, rulers that agree to give their power over to the beast, and he lets them reign for a brief time. Oh, good. The angel in Revelation interprets the 10 horns, the same as Daniel 7 does, or else that would have been awkward. Scholars say these 10 kings could be humans, or they could be other spiritual entities, or, shout out to the few of you whose next thought was, they could be hybrids of the two. Also a possibility, at least in my head. And so what do all these evil rulers, whoever they are, do with their time, their last hurrah? They war against the Lamb. They hate and oppose Jesus. Now we're looking at 15 through 18. The angel continued. The waters you saw on which the harlot was enthroned are peoples and crowds, nations and languages. The waters are people, okay? And the 10 horns you saw together with the beast will turn on the harlot. Here it is. We've reached the verse where Babylon finally gets judged in answer to the prayer of the saints and the martyrs earlier in the book. They'll hate her, violate her, strip her naked, rip her apart with their teeth, or they'll eat her flesh. This ties her in with Jezebel. And then they set fire to her. It was God who put the idea in their heads to turn over the rule to the beast until the words of God are completed. God brings this judgment about. The woman you saw is the great city, tyrannizing the kings of the earth. This might remind Jewish readers of the book of Jeremiah, chapter 4, verse 30. Quote, "What are you doing, you devastated one? Why dress yourself up in scarlet and put on jewels of gold? Why highlight your eyes with makeup? You adorn yourself in vain. Your lovers despise you. They want to kill you." End quote. That's about a different city, but it's the same theme and it's the same visual in this metaphor. The angel explains to John that the waters represent a lot or all of the nations, all the people groups. Then what happens is a big insurrection, a coup type thing, where the 10 rulers and the beasts turn against the prostitute that is Babylon and torture her and kill her. And their wicked accomplice is killed. What we see here happening is justice. The harlot and the beast want to try to take down the church operating from the location in the desert, the wilderness. Here is where, by the way, demons are believed to dwell and often operate from, right? Then they will be punished for that in the very place they had operated out of. Seems fair. And chapter 17 ends with the angel explaining to John exactly who the prostitute avatar is. It's the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. Like we've discussed, the great city here is referencing Babylon of old, but also Rome, and more broadly probably means the evil worldly system, the type of kingdom that's made from oppression and injustice. We see it everywhere. Now there is also a truly great city. Okay? Contrast this to a truly great city made by God, which is heaven, which is the New Jerusalem, which is what Eden was supposed to be, finally will be, right? The city of God. That's the end of the story. We know that everything God does, the enemy does a counterfeit of. There's a city of God, so there's also a city of the enemy. We call it Babylon. There's God's kingdom, which is present wherever Yahweh is invited and glorified, and there's the kingdom of darkness, which is currently present wherever people allow it and partner with it, but it won't always be present because it's gonna be judged and cast down. Its end is imminent. That's the takeaway, once again, from this chapter, from this metaphor, from this vision. Just as a reminder, we are in a war. We're in a very real, unseen, spiritual war. The reason that you have not been taken out in this war is because you're covered with spiritual, divine protection from the Father who loves you. You're made in His image. He delights in you. You're one of His children, and He has put His protection around you wherever you go. That is why you are living. That's why your heart's beating. That's why you are okay right now. I have stood face to face. You can think what you want about this. With people who are demonized, and they're acting like they want to kill me. And I know in my spirit they can't touch me. They can get an inch away from my face, but they are not allowed to harm me. That's how sovereign God is, and that's how extensive His protection is. But why are they allowed to harm that other human that's standing an inch away from me manifesting? Well, we have free will and we choose what we operate in. This is why in the Word of God, He instructs us in His ways, and He tells us not to sin. Are we partnering with the beast, with the dragon, with the Babylon system? Or are we partnering with Yahweh, our Father, who's good, who is love? Our decisions, our actions put us under one of those umbrellas. And if you choose to partner with the sometimes very seductive, very appealing, very powerful looking system of this world, the demonic realm, God will let you. But He's always there with open arms if you change your mind. And I've seen that happen. I've seen people get rid of those things. Easy as that, because God's power is greater. But what does it take? It takes doing things His way. And if you haven't been doing things His way, you got to repent. You got to say, all right, I apologize. I didn't know what I was doing, or whatever the case was. I changed my mind. I want to come into your kingdom even more completely. I want to do things your way. I want to be in the Lamb's army and not part of the beast system anymore. God's name and prayer are very powerful things. When you walk through this life, remember you're in a war and remember to call upon the name, which is Jesus, which is Yahweh, and serve him, worship him, pray. Prayer is huge. It changes things. It matters. Talk to him, ask him, declare his word over your life. Do not walk through this war with prayerlessness. Live a life of prayer. Stay connected to the Creator who has put all that protection around you. Go where he says to go. Do it the way he says to do it. It's better. So let's pick this up next time and look at the rest of this section. We'll look at chapter 18 next time, and it will be just as fascinating as this has been. Thank you so much for geeking out with me, and I hope you have an incredible weekend. God bless.